of my life, I crown thee now. Thy glory be. Lest I forget thy thorn crown brown, lead me to Calvary. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary. Show me the tomb where thou wast laid, tenderly mourned and well. Angels in robes of light arrayed, guarded thee whilst I slept. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary. May I be willing, Lord, to bear daily my cross for thee. Even thy cup of grief to share, thou hast borne all for me. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary.
Let us pray. Our gracious and kind Heavenly Father, giver and sustainer of life, of peace, and love. Holy Father, we give thanks to you for your blessings. We thank you, Father, for the time that you've given us here to worship and to learn from your word. May our hearts and minds be focused on you, Father, and on the lessons that you present to us. May you be with those, Father, sick or hurting or traveling. May you watch over, protect, and guide them, easing pain and discomfort. Now, Father, let us draw to you as we learn about your love and about the love of your Son, Jesus Christ. In his name we pray. Amen.
Morning. Morning. Guess that's behaving right. Yeah. So I hope you're ready for this because y'all are teaching class this morning. Or at least you're teaching me this morning. I feel like the last couple of years I have had to go all the way back and just reinvent the wheel. And a lot of that I've been talking to y'all about since November when I came back up here the first time. And so I gave Tom a picture to put up here. And I want to show you how I feel right now, and maybe you can help me. But that is exactly how I feel. And I have had not writer's block, but it's just like, I guess my brain has been busy with so many things that, I told Larry this morning, people take the lemon wedge and they just twist it. You get everything you can out of it. That's just exactly how I feel. There is nothing beautiful about that. Doesn't that look painful and uncomfortable? But apparently it's a necessary part of life. So I'm not sure if this is just because I'm knocking on the door of the middle age thing, or if it's just because I found myself moving from being an employee to an employer, and from being pretty comfortable in what I believed and what I accepted to now questioning everything, that I'm just exhausted. And I have decided one thing, and I don't remember which member of the church it was that taught me this, but I'm sure that you, Ms. Viva, can attest to the truth of it or not. I really don't remember if it was Diane Lovell, who was Dennis Lovell's wife over at Woody, where we were before we came here, or if it was maybe Elaine Dalton, who was the preacher's wife over at Lantana when we were over there. But they were both educators. And they would hear me talking to my kids, and they would be like, you don't look at a child and say, don't run. What are you supposed to tell a child? Have you ever heard this said before? Instead of speaking in the negative and telling the child, don't run, okay, you're just simply supposed to say, walk. And I was probably in my late 20s or something like that when a person said that to me, and I kind of rolled my eyes. I'm like, what's the difference? But Lena, who also incidentally went to school for education, maybe there's a thing here. When the guys were little, and I would be like, no, this is the thing you can't touch, and this is the thing you can't touch, and don't touch this thing, it'll break or whatever. Alex had to test that more often than the other ones. But the point was, is she's like, well, you've told them everything that they can't do and everything they can't touch. So wouldn't it be a little simpler than remembering that long list of don't do's to maybe give them the shorter list of things that they can do, or that they can touch, or that they can play with? So I've kind of decided in this transition that I'm going through that I'm just about tired of being against everything, and I would rather find things to be for, right? And I mean, so in other words, you can preach or teach, and I mean, this is not even just in the religious realm, probably. Like I said, it's even with the raising of children, but I think that, obviously in preaching and teaching, there are things that you have to teach against, but there's always two sides to that coin, right? In other words, you can say, well, you can preach against fornication, or you could preach for marriage, because that's exactly the argument that Paul made, right? Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, or wife her own husband, and ta-da, problem solved, right? And so I just thought, what would be wrong with that model of being for something and against something? So that's what I'm trying to do with myself. I don't know how long he wants to leave that up there. It's not pretty. But so he'd feel free to take it away. Yeah. So in other words, I am really exhausted with trying to hash out all of this minutia and everything, and neglecting what Jesus called the weightier matters. Do you remember when he challenged people with that saying? He said, you're doing your tithe of mint and anise and the cumin and everything, but you're neglecting the weightier matters of the law, the judgment and the mercy and the things that, I don't know, apparently even according to the Holy Spirit are more important. It's kind of like that really ironic statement that comes, it's out of Samuel, right? It says to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken better than the fat of rams. And that was always one of the things I really had to scratch my head and ask myself why that would be true. Because, well, if you have a command to sacrifice and you have to obey, do the sacrifice, then exactly where does this circle start and circle stop? And I thought to myself, well, that's the whole point. If we were obedient, there would be no need for the sacrifice. And so then that's how I reconciled it in my head. That's kind of the point, that to obey is better than the sacrifice, to listen, to hearken, better than the fat of rams. If you would hear the instruction of what you're supposed to do and just simply do that, then actually there would be no need for the sacrifice, right? Isn't that the whole point why Jesus was the better high priest? Because the Old Testament high priest first had to do what? offer the sacrifice for his own sins, right? And well, Jesus, he didn't have to do that. How nice is that, right? So that's all of the betterness there, which we've talked about. So emerging out of my little crusty brown shell, I remembered recently that there was a cartoon I used to watch as a kid. And I'm gonna have to say this was the 80s. I'm not gonna ask you where you were in the 80s, but I know you weren't a kid. But it was G.I. Joe, and they would always have like a little public service announcement at the end of it. And the guy would say, and now you know, and knowing is half the battle. Well, there I am with my curiosity again. What's the other half? They didn't tell you what the other half was. Don't get me all warmed up and ready to go and not tell me the other half. So I'm just going to ask you, in the religious sense, if knowing is half the battle, what is the other half?
Well, in a lot of things, it's knowing is necessary first, knowing what to do. But if you don't execute, if you don't do it,
there you go. There you go. And that's exactly the conclusion that I came to. If you take the warning, even in the little cartoon about not running through the traffic or not taking candy from strangers or whatever it was, but you don't take that knowledge and apply it and use it, what good is it to you in the first place? So actually, that's really all I have today is probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 verses that basically say the same thing. But I'm trying to drill it into my head from every angle. But like I said, it's like changing an entire paradigm shift. I don't know, the locust was, how many years they go in the ground? It's like 7 years or something, right? How many? Okay, so it says 13 years. So a lot of years they spend down there in the dirt, and then they crawl out, and then they pop out of the shell, and then they eat everything, and then they die. Anyway, some life cycle that is, right? But anyway, so that's just how I've been feeling. And I have probably said this before, and you know what psychological projection is, right? When you like I would complain sometimes to Lena about something, and she would be like, well, but what are you doing? And so basically that's kind of what I realized is what I was seeing in other people, or wanted to see in other people, I wasn't seeing in myself. And I think Gandhi probably worded that really well when he just simply said, be the change that you want to see in the world. Rather than throwing your hands up in the air or rioting in the street or whatever because you're frustrated with the way that the world is and that's not the way that it ought to be, maybe you should just simply try to be the change that you would like to see. That's probably the same thing that Jesus taught. Do to others as you have them do to you. But out of all my frustration, I distilled it down to, I feel like, and you know how it is, if you're emphasizing one thing, like when my grades might have went down just a hair in math, and my mom and my grandparents were like, get your math grade back up. Well, then social studies and English would go down because I was focusing so much more on the math. You know how that goes, right? We are finite people with only so much effort and our energy and ability to focus on any number of things. So I decided that it's like in the church, I feel like we have emphasized so much being right and not so much the doing right. And I don't mean that as a charge against any individual, but I have always felt like, and I don't feel like it ought to be, spectator sport or anything. I feel like we come in here to learn how to make our lives better, how to make other people's lives better. When they come across challenge or hardship in life, that's when we can encourage them and give them that answer, the fear and the hope that is within us. And that's just how it's supposed to work. And then I'm frustrated with my work because I work alone. And so I pop in this place, I pop in that place, but I'm never anywhere along. I'm like a bee on a flower. And you can't really build in-depth, lifelong relationships that way when you're just simply hopping around all the time. So my whole problem is well, all of this knowledge or whatever I have in my head that has benefited me and would benefit others and make the world a better place and bring the change about that I would like to see, how am I supposed to do that? So anyway, that's what I've seen. I feel like, well, there's a lot of emphasis in the church about, knowing what's right, on being right on the issues, but have we minimized doing right because we have overemphasized maybe the being right? So James, it's the first place we're going to look at a text, because this goes back to what we were saying a minute ago, knowing was half of the battle. In chapter 4, which is close to the end of the book, right? So he's kind of concluding things here. He says what? If you know to do good and you doeth it not, to him is sin. So the point is if you have the knowledge in your head of the good that you're supposed to do, but then you refrain from doing it, well, that's not good. And I find myself in that position pretty often. And there have been times where I was going down, the interstate, and then you see that person that's broke down, and you're looking, but you got to look forward, or you're going to hit something, and you're thinking, well, it's already too late for me to stop and back up and check on this person, and I feel bad. And so then that raises the question again, like how am I supposed to incorporate all this stuff into my life? Because my work life is different, and I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to find the way to fit it in. I'm trying to find the way to make it work. But this is a principle that I feel like I need to operate by. If I know the good that I ought to do, but I don't do it, then, well, I have omitted doing the right thing. For me, one of the best biblical examples of that probably is the story of the Good Samaritan. How many people passed that guy that day? It was like 3 of them. There was a priest and their excuses were probably something to the effect of, the work that I have to go do, I can't make myself unclean to help this guy. You can justify it, when you want to justify it. And maybe you're neglecting those weightier matters of the law. Maybe that's one of those issues. So you see my struggle, because I'm only halfway out of the crusty brown shell. So I go back to the beginning of James, because it seems like it's a consistent message through the book. They've always said this is the book of like practical application, practical living. Chapter 1, verse 22, right? What? Be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. So it's like, well, if we sit here and we listen to the lessons that get taught to us, and you're like, well, that's a good and right thing. That's an absolute truth. And, my eyes are open, but we don't take that and we don't do something with it, then I feel like at least it leaves me with a sense of discouragement. And this congregation where we are in Cookeville right now, in the last, how many months, Lena? 5, 6 months? There have been 3 leave there with different reasons than I've ever heard anybody say that they were leaving. And incidentally, of the 3, they're all like mid-50s aged men. One went by himself, his family's still there. The other one, him and his wife left. And the third one, it was him and his wife that left. And I'm thinking, what's with the middle-aged exodus, in the church? And their complaint generally was something to the effect of, well, I'm not growing. And then the people that hear that complaint are kind of like, well, maybe some of that's on you. And I'm thinking, well, but the thing is if we always, I hear the same lessons they hear, right? I mean, we all hear this, the same book. And so I'm like, what is the point? Because what we're hearing is things we ought not do, things we ought to do, things we ought not do, things we ought to do. Where does the rubber meet the road and the theory become the practice, right? In other words, it's sort of like Paul and Silas and Barnabas and John Mark, and we got 4 guys, and we're going to go out to the world, and we're going to preach, and we're going to teach. But somebody took the first step and did the come go with me. That's in a song somewhere, right, Joe? Yes? And it seems like that's the problem, is they're like, well, we're going to go somewhere where there's elders, or we're going to go somewhere where somebody already did the hard work of laying the foundation and have the smooth sailing. I don't know. But it's an absence of leadership. It's an absence of leadership maybe in the congregation, but also within the individual, right? Because you're not taking the initiative either. You have the complaint against the brotherhood in this location, but what did you do? And I find that they're having the same problem that I'm having here, and they're 10 years older than me, and I don't want to be making my exodus in my 50s. So it's just something to think about. But anyway, they seem to be discouraged, and maybe it's the same kind of thing that's eating at me. So consider Acts chapter 10, verse 38, if you want to pull over there. You know, Acts 10 is the story of the Cornelius and everything, right? His household. But there's a really interesting statement there that I would think, at least for me, is helping me simplify the concept of the Christian religion. And it's a small phrase there, but it just says that Jesus went about doing good. Acts 10:38, right? Yeah. Jesus went about doing good. So then I hit my stop button and I step back and I try to evaluate, okay, what did Jesus do? Well, he healed people. I can't do that. He fed the masses. I can't do that. So the things that I'm evaluating that Jesus did when he went about doing good, I'm like, well, I can't do those. So that doesn't help me. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? So I thought, well, if there's no other measure, maybe it's do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which is really vague. But maybe it comes to that point again, if you see the need, you feel the need, if you perceive, if I was in that situation, I sure wish somebody had done this for me. And you just take initiative on the burden that's on your own heart, right? When I was, I'm going to jump ahead of myself probably, but you know, Matthew 25, when Jesus says, right, when I was sick, you visited me. When I was hungry, you fed me. Thirsty, you gave me a drink. In prison, you visited me, and so forth. And that's kind of the idea. We don't know what circumstance we're going to find ourselves in, but maybe we'd think, oh, if those people sitting up there, you know, believed, did what they believed, and they would be doing this and they would be doing that. And maybe sometimes being the recipient is what helps us to be all right, let me say it this way. Being the beneficiary, right, helps you be the benefactor. Did I get that right? In other words, being the one who received mercy or love or grace or something from another individual. Now I see how I might be able to incorporate that in my life. But anyway, Jesus went about doing good. For me, I thought that's how much simpler can it get? So on this idea of knowing good and doing good and so forth, from the Christian perspective, Ephesians chapter 2, and this is verses 8 through 10, but specifically, he says what? For we are created in Christ Jesus, what? Unto good works, right? That we should walk in them, that we should live in them. The whole idea, right, is that seems to be we ought to be like Jesus. We ought to be about doing good. And I'm thinking to myself, is it just because we're too busy? You remember this was the time of the agrarian culture, right? So people had to plant in the spring, and then the dog days of summer when it's really hot, you know, there's not a lot to do. You got to weed your garden a little bit, right? And then the harvest comes in, and then you're working really hard at harvest time to get everything put up for the winter time, when again, things are kind of dormant, things are slower, and life is different. But see, now we've got electricity, there's places where you can work, they got 24 hours a day worth of shifts. We don't really have this wintertime downtime. We don't even have the evening, nighttime downtime. And so now I think it's more of a perplexing issue on where are we supposed to stick all this goodness that we ought to be doing. And so I've been rambling for 20 minutes, but I told you you have to teach the class. I'm here today to be a beneficiary of your experience because I'm struggling with this. And I've been told these bugs that come out of shells like this, you know, you're not supposed to help them out because something about the pressure of that shell is what squeezes the juice into their wings and allows them to strengthen, you know, otherwise if you help them out, they can't fly and then they get eaten by a bird. I don't want to be eaten by a bird. So I'm asking you, how in your life, I mean, like, you know, I know that, again, you're at a different place because generally this is, like you say, you'll meet people on the golf course or talk to people there. but I'm struggling with how to make this transition to get this stuff just out of my head and into my life, because I think I see brethren fizzling out because they're discouraged because there's no manifestation of what we read and we believe, at least not together. So anyway, that's what I'm just asking you. How do we get it out of here and into the world? Yes.
Well, first of all, what you said about making the time. Compared to the old times, we have a lot of technology that helps us save time. We don't sit there and wash our laundry all day. We don't even have to do dishes because something else does that for us. Our stoves cook way faster than the wood stove, that you have to spend time splitting the wood and then firing up, waiting until it's hot. So you save all that time on that. So there you go, you have time freed up, but it's just we have TV and other things that fill up our time, and we can notice that it takes our time from the other people. And I wanted to say about your verse 38 in Acts 10, it was about doing good and healing all that were oppressed of the devil. So you take the healing out of the way, doing good and, so you think about what Jesus did. Mostly he took time and made effort to satisfy people's needs, starting with the very first miracle. He saw the need and he helped them with their need at the wedding feast. But every time people asked him to come, I don't think that when he was called to Lazarus being dead, that people thought, okay, we'll just call him and he'll bring him back to life. But they wanted him there to comfort and to support them. And that was the good that he was called to do, and he satisfied that need. He spent time talking to people, stopping, and just one of the things to do.
So, in short,
I think one of the other things is we got to be cautious individually not to let the world consume our time. And if we let it consume our time, we don't have time for to be in God's Word or the personal study that we're told to do. We don't have time to go out and do the good things for other people because we've let the world consume us. And that's one of the real problems that I see, especially with today's technology, because it's so busy around us that you got to be on guard constantly to stay away from it.
So Lena's short answer was that you make time, and Tom was simply agreeing with that with the busyness of the world, you have to be intentional about it and make the space, make the time, look for the opportunity. But I guess it's bothered me, I guess, for a really long time. And let me test your memory real quick. When we first came over here the first year, that would have been 2008. And that's when I had gone around a lot of places in the county giving out flyers, because I had built a website before and it was working internationally, and I was doing Bible questions and study with people, sending materials, would send out a CD that probably had 30, 40 sermons on it. I mean, I was getting material out there, and I could feel the results because I was actually talking to people back and forth, and I liked that. But the problem was, it's sort of like knowing there's a ton of fish in the sea and you've got your pole out there and they're all looking at your bait and they want to eat it. But you can't ever get them reeled in because they're way far away somewhere else. And so I thought, okay, updated model. We're going to build a website and we're not going to promote it all over the internet, which is what you usually do with a website. I wanted to promote it on foot in the community. So you remember in the 80s and the 90s, you'd go in the lobby of the grocery store and there would be a flyer there and you'd tear off a phone number for a car for sale or whatever. I literally made a sheet like that had web address on it there, and you could just tear off web address about having a Bible question or a problem or this or that, the other. And I printed a few of those, nice color copies, and I took them to the congregations. I don't know if we went to 8 or 10 of them maybe. And we said, this is what we're working on. I will study with them online. If they live in your neighborhood, when I'm studied with them enough to get them into the assembly, I'm going to send them your way. Man, I got no help on that at all. But when we came over here, I set up, I did it at Woody for about a year or so, and then it came over here and we probably did it for half of a year to a year because Philip showed up and that changed things. But we were doing every third Thursday night of every month was doing like an open Bible study, had the projector down there, the computer with the Bible program and stuff in it. We were doing, back and forth. And I had a guy that came up from Dayton. He was a member of the church, but he came up from Dayton like twice for that. But we just never could get any traction with that. And that was discouraging because I wanted to find something, to do. And I'd seen it work on a big scale. I just wanted to make it work on the little scale. But I guess ever since then, when I wasn't really doing things in the way that I think I ought to be doing things, I've probably been a little discouraged or irritated. And then I realized too that I have a primary responsibility, right, to the in-house church family and to the in-house family, right? And I mean, I'm that consumes time, does it not? And can you neglect these weightier matters for other things, right? And I'm torn between priorities. I'm telling you, that's why that bug picture says I'm split in half. That's exactly what that looks like, right? So anyway, I'm struggling with all that. Yes.
Relationships before are so important. Just to know somebody is not good enough.
Right.
You need to have a relationship.
And you're really good at that, aren't you?
Well, I hope so.
You adopt all kinds of people. And maybe does it come natural to you, or did you have to learn how to do that and make your way into people's life? Because you used to make me really uncomfortable in the beginning, and I've told you that before, right? It was invading my personal space, at my sink doing my dishes and stuff. It's like I can do that,
You got over it.
But you were persistent and kind of insistent about that. Yes, that you felt like there was a work you needed to be doing, and you weren't going to let somebody stop you from doing that work. I know a guy like that down in Cookeville. He's a few years older than me, and if people are moving, he helps them move. If they need a yard mowed, he mows their yard. But maybe there is a certain level of insistence and persistence that goes with that. Not taking no for an answer when you see a need.
You have to win their heart.
All right. So,
Everybody has a heart testing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even if they're 2 sizes too small.
Yeah.
So, Grinch.
It grows.
All right, we are at 34. We got a few minutes left. I had one more note that it came out of 2 Timothy 3. When we quoted a lot about all the scriptures given by inspiration of God. But the point of all that is that the man of God might be thoroughly furnished unto what? Every good work. So it's as if the instructions and the opportunities and everything are there. The illustrations of it being done are there. We just had to figure out a way how to adapt it and adopt it and implement it in our own life. And I guess we've kind of hit on it a little bit with Judy's comments back there about having the opportunity. That's what we get out of Galatians 6, right? As we therefore have the opportunity, we should be ready and willing to do good to everybody, but especially them, the household of faith. So I said all of that, and that's cool. We're down to a good point in time now. We're gonna open Hebrews 10. I did this at the table with Lena yesterday because again I'm trying to figure things out, and like I said, some people I think they're discouraged. They don't have the personal drive or sense of leadership in themselves to bring this out. But if we're over in Hebrews 10, if I can get myself there real quick. I want to go down to verse 24. Well, let's go to 23. How about that? Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works. I don't know that I've ever seen this. And so I asked Lena, thinking, what does this look like? You've got an assembly, because the very next verse is not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together. This is the context of it. So there's a group of people, and they are supposed to consider one another to provoke unto love and good works. I remember one time that I was given a presentation on what the congregation that was when I was at Lantana, what they were supporting, and they were supporting one guy a little bit with his education, and I guess you'd say preacher education. And there were two of us that were in this kind of apprenticeship program that a couple congregations were cooperating on. And then there was the Ukraine mission work, and then there was the India mission work. And you can support a good handful of people in India because it was very inexpensive. It was like $20, $25 a month to support somebody in India. It was not much at all. So on the slide, I had a picture of some 60 people, I guess, that were directly supported from that one congregation. And I was thoroughly impressed by that. I wasn't being negative at all. I was like, a couple years before that, there was no faces on there. So to me, it was astounding. And I thought, can you imagine? This is where I went wrong. Can you imagine what else we could do? Because I couldn't even imagine that. And then somebody's like, are you trying to say that I'm not doing enough? And I thought, where'd that even come from? I was like complimenting the people that I knew that were directly involved with some of those. Because one of the guys, boys, went to Ukraine the year before I did. And I kind of pointed to him. I said, when I think about this work and what's going on there, I think about you. And apparently he took that as he needed to be doing more output or something. And so my question is even when you're coming from a very impressed, blown away perspective about things that are getting done, and you look at somebody and you're like, can you imagine what else we can do? To me, that's my mindset of what provoking somebody to good works is. It's like, hey, look what we've got done and we can do more, and then you get shot down. So exactly how would you provoke somebody to good works? Or how would you have somebody nudge you or provoke you in order to do good works? I haven't seen it done. And I don't know how to do it, but I'm fixing to arm wrestle a couple guys 3 times my size down to a table next month, because when I sell my bread route, it pays my house off, and that changes my dynamic in life quite a bit, because I would like to gear myself up to get back over to Ukraine when they stop shooting and help out over there. I've got some plans of things I'd like to do, is my point. What?
I don't think you have not seen people provoke others to love, but I'll just say how you did it. I remember when we had a ladies meeting here and Janice bringing out all the work that ladies do, and I remember getting fascinated about Bread Life and signing up and doing it with the ladies here. And then when we went to, it was going on here, so it's not like I could encourage this, although I remember the second group here deciding to do that as well. So I feel like that love and that good work spread. But then we went to the Homestead congregation, and they were searching for ideas. What could they do? Some good works for community, maybe spreading the gospel to people, maybe talking to people and encouraging them, and giving them that idea and how they jumped on that idea. And well, I haven't been to Homestead for a year and a half, but they're still doing it. I got a message last week saying, well, if you're in town, stop by because we're serving lunches at Bread of Life. We'll be happy to see you. So I feel like this is the big work and the love for other people that are shared with.
To be fair, these were people that were looking for an opportunity, and you said, hey, look, here's an opportunity. See, here is water. What hinders me to be baptized? We have the opportunity, right?
Okay, but this verse doesn't talk about dead people. It's one another, so you're sharing with the Christians.
I understand. But I mean, it's not like you went to them and you said, you need to get up off your seat and do something with yourself. My question is, what does it mean to provoke somebody to good works? Not to give a person a job who's looking for a job. I understand what you're saying, but for me, that's still not answering this question. So it leaves me, yes.
The best way is to be the example. Can't do it any better.
And that's kind of what she's saying. She saw what some people were doing, and then when other people were looking for something to do, she patched that over.
That's the best way.
So that leaves me with Romans 7:18, right? For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For the will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. So I think this is the thing, funny, ironic, or that it may seem, that Paul wrestled with it, but sometimes finding how to do what he ought to do was apparently hard for him too. But I don't want to stay in that boat. I've eventually got to get the other half of me out of the brown crusty shell and complete the life cycle. And so I'm looking anyway at trying to find a way to transition myself and to get what I have in my head out into my life. And I reckon I'll probably get some bumps and bruises along the way. But that's life. Joe says that's just life. Just deal with it. Anyway, I appreciate it. I want to make myself better, and obviously.
It might be no more than saying to someone, let's go over and see someone. Because they've been hurting.
Yep.
They've just gotten out of the 3 days in the hospital or something like that. That's taking someone else along with you to help someone else. It's not any big thing.
Yeah. But it takes a willing mind and a loving heart and the time, right? Yes.
Jesse, maybe you're looking for a big home run to hit. Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, he said that just let your light shine before others, so that when they see your good works, that they will glorify the Father. Every day you're out there among people,
Mm-hmm.
and you have that opportunity for them to see you and to see your light shine. Because whether you know it or not, the Spirit that's within you, the Holy Spirit, manifests itself to other people in your actions and your speech.
Oh, that's true. I won't deny that. And probably, maybe it's just I'm way too results oriented. I like to see distinct markers of improvement and progress and stuff, right? And if I don't see that in myself, then I'm discouraged by that.
God gives the increase.
I had that written down too. That was part of it. Somebody's planting, somebody's watering, and neither one of them are anything but God who gives the increase, right? I don't know, and it's a patience thing, right? And I tell people that all the time when I talk about the planting. I mean, if you put a walnut in the ground, you're a solid 2 years before it comes out of the shell, right? You can eat a radish in 6 weeks, it's just patience, I guess. Thank you.